Our next speaker today is Carly Shabo. Many high fives. Before arriving at Scripps, Carly spent years working as assistant program director for a nonprofit organization in Key West that focused on education and outreach surrounding the coral reef ecosystem. And while conservation education plays a crucial part in sustainable future, when Hurricane Irma struck, she felt she had not done enough. She wanted to make a change and built a career with more direct involvement in environmental policy decisions. She's excited to be continuing her work with the Waite Institute this summer, empowering communities to protect their ocean and marine resources. And I just want to say on a personal note, it's been a delight to see Carly grow towards that goal of working in policy and management over the course of this year. She's really been somebody who stood out to us as a person who is incredibly talented, capable, and able to go far, I think, in the world of policy. So it's been a real privilege to be able to spend this year with her. The title of her project is More Than a Paper Park, Designing a Management Plan for Curaçao's Fish Reproduction Zones.
Thank you, Samantha. This spring, my capstone project took me to the Southern Caribbean, to an area known for its tropical climate, swaying palm trees, and gorgeous waters. And while photos on the internet gave me some background on what I would find when I arrived, what I saw when I got there was not quite what I expected. Now don't panic. When I landed, the water was in fact the perfect Caribbean blue. But when I dove below the surface of that warm water, I expected to see an abundance of corals, colors, and of course, those gorgeous reef fish. Unfortunately, around many areas of the island, what I found looked a lot more like this: dead corals, overgrowth of algae, and an alarming lack of fish. The problem and the proposed solution was the exact reason I embarked on my journey to create a management plan for a newly designated network of marine protected areas. While there are many definitions of marine protected areas, or MPAs, the general idea is that it's a space in the ocean where activities are more strictly regulated than the surrounding water, and that ecosystems are allowed to recover. There are many types of MPAs, and each type has its own goals, regulations, and strategies for success. But as more and more countries set these lofty goals for the percentage of near and offshore water given this protection, there has been an increase in what many people would call paper parks. So what exactly is a paper park? It's a legally established protected area where experts believe current protection activities are insufficient to halt the degradation. And estimates on the percentage of some countries' MPAs that exist primarily on paper range as high as 80 to 90%. Here are just a few examples of the media surrounding the phenomenon of paper parks. Putting it down on paper without actual management in place can give a false sense of security that the marine resources will be protected, when in reality, the damage and destruction will continue to occur. That brings us to the star of my story and the home of the newly designated marine protected areas, Curaçao of the Lesser Antilles. Located just 40 miles north of the Venezuelan coast and below the hurricane belt, Curaçao, a constituent country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, is best known for its bright blue water, the inspiration for the liqueur, I might add, its white sand beaches, and vibrant architecture and kind, welcoming people. And while there are many reasons why the state of Curaçao's marine resources need protection, including pollution, habitat destruction, and invasive species, my management plan focused on the biggest problem faced in their waters: overfishing or simply taking too many fish. This chart shows the change in proportion of total catch for individual fish species in Curaçao between 1908 and 2006. Anything you see below the x-axis indicates a reduction of those species. Some key commercial species are seen so rarely today that it's considered an 100% reduction. They have simply disappeared from the area. Fishermen have targeted reef fish stocks of Curaçao for hundreds of years, but in the last 2 centuries, new fishing gear has allowed for previously healthy fish stocks to deplete rapidly. Fish species of commercial interest, including groupers and snappers, have declined in abundance by over 90% in the last 40 years alone and are now considered rare. Enter the Waite Institute and its blue halo. The blue halo describes the waters encircling an island where ocean resources are used sustainably, profitably, and enjoyably. The Blue Halo Initiative deeply engages stakeholders in a science-based, community-driven approach to comprehensive ocean zoning, such as the proposed MPAs. Curaçao's Blue Halo was launched in 2015 with the goal of sustainable management of Curaçao's ocean and coastal waters. Their proposal to establish the fish reproduction zones was the birth of the project that I took on this spring. In order to stall and reverse the declines in reef fish species and help to restore the ecosystem as a whole, a concise and clear management plan was needed. In order to create this management plan, an initial draft was created using previous Caribbean MPA management plans as a reference. Those plans were collected in a literature review, and effective components were noted and included in the draft that I created. When I arrived on Curaçao, I attempted to visit each proposed zone to assess its condition. I received scientific assessments of various locations around Curaçao, but I wanted to see each site for myself to view the included ecosystems as well as its current usage. This assessment helped to inform the justification behind protection of each zone and their various habitats and levels of degradation. Finally, I engaged stakeholder groups on Curaçao in order to determine that my management plan was realistic and feasible, given their cultural norms, budgetary and personnel constraints, and previous efforts for similar marine protected areas in Curaçao and other Dutch Caribbean islands. The management plan I created is comprehensive to cover the fish reproduction zones, a network of 6 marine protected areas designed to protect ecologically important ecosystems, including nursery and adult habitats. Each varies in size, but in total they cover 7.95 square kilometers and extend just 200 meters from shore. By including a diverse range of habitats and ensuring the inclusion of the most pristine habitats on Curaçao, such as the waters on the most eastern point of the island, Oostpunt, as well as those in need of recovery, such as on the western tip of Westpunt, the zones can continue to protect areas that are in fact intact and provide a safe haven in areas that are still in need of recovery. In order to effectively edit and complete the management plan for the zones and to ensure it would not become the dreaded paper park, I met with various groups on Curaçao. Under the direct guidance of the Waite Institute's site manager and Curaçao's senior policy advisor to the Ministry of Health, Environment, and Nature, I attended meetings and discussed my initial draft with representatives from various ministries, nonprofit groups, the Coast Guard, Tourism Board, fishermen, and more. The conversation that stood out to me the most happened by chance. At a meeting with the pilot at the Harbor Master's office, we spoke at length about the changes he had seen over the years, and halfway through the conversation, he asked if we wanted to meet his best friend, and the best kind of friend, the kind with a boat, that he had spent all of his downtime fishing with. With that, we left his office, took to the road, and headed across town to meet his lifelong friend and recreational fisherman, Erwin. He spent over an hour recalling some of his favorite fishing memories with countless stories of fighting massive fish in to bring them in for his famous fish stew. And I know what you're thinking, but no, these weren't just fishing tales. He showed me the photos to prove it. He showed me fish after fish after fish that he had caught in Curaçao years ago, and noted that in order to catch these kinds of fish and these size of fish, today he had to take his boat elsewhere. In fact, most of the time he didn't fish in Curaçao at all. He went over to Bonaire. When I proposed the idea of no-take zones to a fisherman, I expected to have some problems, but he admitted that that was something he thought was necessary for years. And while his story just confirmed what I'd heard in all my other meetings, it was still really surprising to hear. Before I began this project, if someone had asked me what a Curaçaoian politician, scientist, nonprofit group, and fisherman all had in common, first, I'd probably think it's the start of a very unusual joke, but second, I would likely think not very much. The most surprising thing I learned in the stakeholder engagement process was that each and every person I spoke with was on the exact same page. The fish were disappearing, and it was a major problem. The impacts to the fishing industry is obvious. The impact to the tourism industry would be severe, and the impact to the local people could be devastating. The harsh reality of this situation helped to inform the management objectives that I created for this plan. The core of the management plan comes down to the objectives we hope to achieve and the actions necessary to reach those objectives. And while the objectives cover many aspects, including legal designation, increased awareness and enforcement, sustainable financing, etc., the objectives I want to focus on today focus on stopping the degradation of habitats, promoting increasing levels of fish population, and increasing awareness and understanding of the MPAs. Originally, I sought out to create completely no-take fish reproduction zones, an area set aside where no removal of anything would be allowed. A similar network was created in the nearby island of St. Lucia, and in just 3 years after the designation was created, fish in the zones tripled. In my research, I found countless other examples of that taking place. In Curaçao, however, local tradition of using a beach sign net to catch big eye scad is an important part of the culture and provides sustenance for struggling families. In order for this type of legislation to pass and get the support needed to ensure success, a compromise was needed. While not the biological ideal, the decision was made to include an exception to the no-take regulations to allow for the local people to continue to use the nets. And by including that exception, it ensured continued support within the fishing community, which is the only way to get this park off the paper and into the water. Finally, to gain continued support, efforts were made to educate the local people, especially the fishermen, of the new regulations, and most importantly, the reasoning behind them. In addition to educational seminars, guides, rules and regulations at landing sites, we're going to update the signage a bit. We found these around the island on beaches and in parks. My plan mandates an update to include regulations to remind everyone to comply and also to not be a jerk. In the end, my goal for the project was to create something tangible that would not collect dust on an academic shelf, but instead come to life and have meaningful impact to those involved. My background in marine biology and my excitement to move into the world of marine policy allowed me to create this plan that will be submitted to Curaçao's ministries for consideration for implementation. It's my hope that the fish reproduction zones are established and protected as written, and Curaçao's fish stocks rebound to support the people in ecosystems for current and future generations. And most importantly, I hope the necessary follow-through occurs, and this does not become yet another of the world's paper parks. I'd like to thank my Capstone Advisory Committee for their support on this project, as well as Curaçao's Ministry of Health and Environment, especially Faisal Dilrosun, for his guidance and encouragement throughout this project, and Adira Palm for her hard work in wrangling all our stakeholders into meetings. I'm grateful for my family and friends, my Reef Relief team listening from afar, my wonderful parents and Coley and Turk for their endless support this year, and finally my PhD mentor Garfield and my amazing MAS MBC cohort. I couldn't have done it without you guys. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I was just so clear. I get it. Crystal.
So when you were having these meetings, did you find any resistance from the local communities?
I really didn't, and I was shocked. Being someone from outside the community, it's a little scary to come in and pretend you know more than the local people because you don't. And that's why the meetings were so important to me. To take on a project in a foreign country, but there's a heavy weight on your shoulder. You don't want to take the power away from the people involved. They know better than anybody else. That being said, they were so welcoming. Wait has had a presence on the island for years, and their positive relationship certainly helped to get our foot in the door. And I didn't have really any major resistance to the type of plan that I was proposing, mostly because they had seen the problem themselves for so many years. And it was important to them to have a hand in going forward to give their input so that they could be included in the conversation.